You won't believe what my parents did. They stole nearly $10,000 from my emergency fund, money I had saved for my chronic autoimmune condition and future, all for a lavish vacation. Then, they had the audacity to call me a mistake. This isn't just a story about theft. It's about a betrayal so deep it shattered my entire family. My parents initially told me they planned to spend the summer at home, claiming they couldn't even afford a simple picnic with relatives and chiding me for spending money on takeout. I truly believed them. However, my trust was shattered when I received a notification $9,750 had been withdrawn from my backup account. Every charge was laid bare. First-class airfare to McWinnis, a private luxury suite with an infinity pool, a personal driver, designer, shopping, and restaurant reservations that costs more than my monthly rent, all charged to my emergency fund. They were never supposed to touch that account without asking me first. The second punch came when my brother accidentally sent me a text. He never reads his statements. Don't worry. That's when I realized they assumed I wouldn't notice, that I was too naive to check. This wasn't impulsive. It was premeditated. They gambled on my silence and loyalty, but they didn't get it. I simply replied, "Read this," then immediately froze the account, flagged all charges as fraudulent, contacted the bank, canceled their bookings, and disabled their access. The refund was on its way, and their luxurious trip was ruined. They would arrive in Greece with nowhere to go. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat in the dark, waiting for the inevitable fallout. A loud crack from outside jolted me. I rushed to the window and saw my car's windshield shattered, a landscaping rock embedded in the center. My father was pacing angrily, my mother waving her arms behind him, and my sister stood smirking on the driveway. I opened the door. My father immediately screamed, "You selfish little bastard. After everything we've done for you, that money was ours. You gave us access. If you didn't want us to use it, you should have said so." My mother chimed in, berating me for embarrassing them. "We told everyone about this trip. Do you know how humiliating it is? You're ungrateful." My sister echoed, "Yes, finally, someone tells him." I said nothing, just looked at my car and then back at them. "Come in," I called. "You want to talk? Let's talk." As they walked in, still yelling, I went to my bedroom, shut the door, and called the police. I reported property damage and a possible assault, mentioning that everything was caught on my front camera. The officer said they'd arrive in under 10 minutes. So, I stalled, letting my parents repeat their arguments, letting my father threaten to cut me off, my mother cry, and my sister mock me. When the police knocked, I simply pointed to the door. "The rock is still on the car and there's video. I want to file a report." They fell silent until an officer escorted my father outside to take him to the station. My mother stood paralyzed. I filed the report, requesting full payment for the windshield and including a statement about emotional distress. The refund arrived that afternoon. But my true revenge was just beginning. After the police took my father, an unsettling silence filled the house. My mother sat stiffly, seemingly not comprehending what had happened. My sister paced, looking between the door and me, unsure who to be angry with. After nearly 20 minutes, my mother's phone rang. I heard her in the kitchen, her voice cracking as she tried to sound calm. "Yes, they took him. Ethan called the police. I don't know what he told them. No, it's not what it looks like." I didn't need to say anything. I drove to the station, filed a full statement, and handed over the doorbell camera footage of my father smashing the windshield. I calmly detailed everything: the theft, the verbal threats, the destruction. When they asked if I wanted to press charges, I said yes, not just for the damage but for what it symbolized. The windshield was the final straw. Later that day, my father agreed to settle, transferring money for the damage plus an extra $1,000 for emotional pain. He must have thought it would make things better, but it didn't. When I returned home, my mother and sister were still there. My mother avoided my gaze, while my sister gave me a furious look, as if I were the betrayer. I went to my room and locked the door, not sleeping that night. Instead, I pulled up every financial record associated with them: bills, tuition payments, subscriptions, logins, and cut off every single one. By midday the next day, I had called the university and informed them I would no longer be responsible for my sister's tuition, and my financial support would cease immediately. They said they'd notify her within 24 hours. A few hours later, she was screaming outside my door. I didn't respond, only heard something, likely a book, hit the wall before she stormed out. I watched from my window as she paced the driveway, calling someone, probably my mother. 2 days later, I stopped the automatic payments for my mother's arthritis medication. I had been secretly covering the bill because her insurance barely covered it, not because she begged me, but because I thought it was important to help her. I called the clinic and requested billing be switched back to the patient. I removed my card from everything, without warning or explanation. This wasn't about getting even. It was about cleanly cutting them off. They believed they could use me like an ATM, then destroy my property and act like I was the one who crossed the line, expecting me to just take it. No, the betrayal ran too deep. This wasn't just about a vacation. It was about them understanding what that money truly was for. My health, my future, my backup plan. They didn't care, didn't hesitate. And when I confronted them, Their first reaction was to smash my car and yell at me in my own home, expecting me to give in and continue paying for everything. They had no idea who they were dealing with, and this was only the beginning. They never apologized, not for emptying my emergency fund, not for the rock through my windshield, not even for yelling at me as if I were a stranger who had broken into their home. If anything, they doubled down. I kept expecting a message, an attempt to reconcile, even a weak apology, but nothing came. My mother went silent, my father vanished, and only my sister continued with passive-aggressive Instagram posts like "family is blood, but not everyone deserves yours," and photos with captions about cutting off dead weight. She didn't tag me, but I got the message. Then, a physical letter arrived, my name printed in block letters, no return address. Inside was a typed 2-page letter signed by both my parents, formal and cold. They used terms like irreparable damage and family shame, claiming I had publicly embarrassed them and that my actions were vengeful, ungrateful, and morally compromised. The final sentence hit hardest. "From this moment forward, we no longer consider you our son." I didn't cry or shout. I simply folded the letter, placed it in the drawer with my medical records, and closed it. They knew I was ill. They knew what the money was for. I had been living with a chronic autoimmune condition for 2 years, dealing with flare-ups, hospital trips, expensive medications, and weeks I couldn't work. They were there when I left my previous job and helped me apply for disability aid. They knew what the fund was for, yet they drained it for a lavish holiday. They didn't just steal from me. They stole my safety net, my peace of mind, and when I fought back, they discarded me like garbage. A few days after the letter, my father left a voicemail. He wanted to speak like men. He didn't apologize, only said he probably shouldn't have gone so far with the rock, but I had pushed him. Then he said something that made my skin crawl. "You have made your point. Now be a man and make things right with your family," as if I were the one who broke it. So, I did exactly what he asked. I made things right, my way. First, I contacted the storage unit company where they kept antique furniture, family artifacts, and paintings they planned to sell. They had fallen behind on payments months ago, and I, like a fool, had settled the late fees. Since I was still on the lease, I terminated it immediately, with no advance notice. I told the manager to send the standard 2-week pickup notification. Whatever remained after that would be auctioned. I didn't even tell my parents, letting the email surprise them. Next, I tackled the kitchen debt. 3 years prior, they took out a ridiculously expensive loan to renovate their kitchen, and the bank wouldn't approve it without a guarantee. I signed it back then because we are family, a phrase that now felt poisonous. I called the bank, emailed them all the documents, and informed them about the windshield, the letter, and the stolen money. After a week of back and forth, they removed me from the loan. They would have to refinance or pay the entire remaining sum. Either way, it was no longer my problem, and it felt great. It wasn't about being clean. What they did wasn't just treachery. It was a declaration. They drew the line, crossed it, and made sure I understood my place in their world. Despite everything, a part of me still hoped they would reach out, call and say, "We messed up. Might to fix things." But the reality kept breaking through. They disowned me over a holiday, choosing luxury over loyalty. Now I was giving them exactly what they wanted. No more son. 2 weeks of silence passed, the time it took them to shift from fury to desperation. Initially, I thought they were licking their wounds, perhaps humbled or hoping I'd crack and crawl back. But the silence was unsettling. I expected something. Big, another voicemail, a dramatic text, my sister throwing a fit. Nothing came until I received a call from an unknown number. "Hi, Ethan, this is Randall Porter. I'm an attorney representing your parents. They've asked me to contact you regarding certain common financial concerns," he said. I hung up before he could finish. 5 minutes later, a voicemail appeared from the same person, now using terms like mediation, property problems, and cooperative resolution. Apparently, they wanted to discuss common financial arrangements before things got complicated. They had already broken into my account, stolen $10,000, damaged my car, and disowned me, and now they were worried things might get complicated. The next day, my sister arrived. She used an old spare key I'd forgotten to deactivate, as if she still belonged in my life. No knock. She just walked in like it was still her house. I found her in the kitchen, drinking from a mug, as if it were a family gathering. She said Mom hadn't been eating, and Dad was talking about selling the house and even withdrawing from his retirement. She claimed I had started something neither of us could stop. I informed her the key wouldn't work next time. She said, "Fine." But before leaving, she pulled an envelope from her purse and slid it across the countertop. Inside was a handwritten will, not official, just something my father scribbled on yellow legal paper. I almost didn't look, but one statement caught my eye. "In the event that I die, Sarah and Melinda will receive an equal share of my assets." Nothing about me, not even mentioned. It was as if I never existed. She watched me read it, emotionless, waiting for my reaction. "You're not surprised, are you?" she said. I didn't respond. I simply folded the will, put it back in the envelope, and left it on the table. She was halfway out the door when she turned back. By the way, she explained, Mom had one of her prescriptions blocked at the pharmacy. They said the card was refused. She broke down in front of the clerk. I had to leave empty-handed. I didn't flinch. I just said, she's the one who made that choice. After she left, I sat for a while, not furious or sad, just hollow. The will didn't sting as much as it should have. If anything, it confirmed what I already knew. They never intended to see me as family again. Not even in death. Later that night, I reopened an old financial dashboard I had forgotten about. It was still linked to a checking account I had used during the pandemic to manage their bills. The account had about $600 when I stopped using it, but someone had been using it. Small withdrawals spaced over weeks, $32 here, $19 there, nothing major until I saw it. Multiple transactions on a gambling website, then more and more, each with my father's name, hundreds of dollars. It didn't stop. This wasn't just about the vacation. The trip was a smokescreen. They weren't just careless. They were sinking, drowning in their own mess, too arrogant to admit it. They needed the vacation, not because they deserved a break, but because they were desperate and wanted one more getaway on my dime. I had often wondered how they had devolved from proud, obstinate individuals to greedy, impulsive liars. But now, I saw they weren't just trying to hurt me, they were trying to survive. And they figured if they could twist the story enough to make me the villain, I'd come back and save them. But I was no longer that person, and they still had no idea what was coming. By the end of the month, their lives unraveled in real time. I didn't have to guess. It began subtly. Bank warnings, strange emails, calls from creditors I hadn't heard from in years. They had gotten sloppy, using old accounts with traces of my information still attached. My name appeared as a backup contact on a credit card I never knew existed. Another listed me as an authorized user from when I helped them rebuild their credit after the 2008 crisis. They probably thought I wouldn't notice as they tried to exploit every available connection, but I did. I thoroughly cleaned everything. I called every bank and lender, removed my name, and flagged all attempts. Every time I shut a door, I envisioned them behind it, knowing it was irrevocably locked. But the major crack appeared a week later. I received a call from an old family friend, Mr. Blake, who ran a body shop where my father used to get our cars repaired. He wasn't calling for small talk. Ethan, your father came by here last night. He wasn't sober. Said some words I didn't quite understand, but they sounded nasty. He kept screaming you had wrecked everything. Then he smashed a mirror in the office and departed without paying. He paused. I simply felt you should know he is not doing well. I thanked him and hung up. The house of cards was crumbling. I had no idea how deep their debts went, but it didn't matter. I wasn't paying anything. They had openly and officially dismissed me. Still, a part of me wanted to know how far they'd fall, not out of cruelty, but because if I was going to walk away permanently, I needed to know I wasn't leaving too soon. The next surprise came from the hospital billing department. Years ago, I had put myself as an emergency contact for my mother and never updated it. They called to confirm her insurance had ended and she hadn't paid for her treatments. Apparently, she had been missing appointments for weeks. When I asked if she was okay, they said they weren't allowed to say anything more. I didn't call her. I didn't send money. She knew how to contact me. She simply didn't want to. Then came the ultimate blow. A certified letter, not from their lawyer but directly from my parents. Inside, scribbled in permanent marker over a folded sheet of blank paper, was one line. You were a mistake. No signature, no return address, just those 4 words. I didn't cry. I laughed quietly, bitterly, because it was almost comical how much effort they put into pretending I was never a part of them, as if they could erase me from history with a single sentence. I placed the letter next to the first one, in the same drawer as the will and pharmacy receipts, my personal archive of what treachery looks like when written in your own handwriting. That night, I started a new document on my computer, titled Final Accounts. Inside, I documented every payment, loan, favor, and sacrifice I had made for them over the previous decade. It took longer than I expected. At the bottom I wrote, no repayment needed. Just never speak to me again, because they were right about one thing. I was no longer their son. Life became calm, not tranquil or peaceful yet, but like a room that had been emptied after a storm. No more phone calls, text messages, passive-aggressive letters, or drama. The people who used to orbit my life like fixed stars had vanished. For the first few days, the silence was louder than their shouts. I knew they wouldn't come back, not in the way people usually mean it. I knew because they meant every word in their final letter, because if you can say, you were a mistake, and mail it as a legal document, there's nothing left to save. So I began removing the final remnants of them from my life. I removed my name from all joint files, backup contacts, and emergency references. I changed phone numbers, started new accounts, deleted previous subscriptions related to the house, and even canceled my dental coverage, which was still under my father's old plan from years ago. I wanted nothing that would tie me back to them. No paper trail, no forgotten connections. It wasn't fury anymore. It was clarity, and it came just in time. Soon after, I started receiving messages from old family, friends, and neighbors I heard from in years. They weren't checking on me. They were spreading gossip, apparently. My parents had sold their house, not just sold it, but trashed it, selling rapidly below market value, probably to avoid foreclosure. No moving truck, no official farewell. They took whatever they could carry and vanished. One person said she saw my mother leaving with a suitcase, crying. Another overheard my father yelling at someone on the phone in the middle of the night, demanding money. Nobody knew where they went, not even my sister, who reportedly moved in with a guy 2 towns over. I didn't ask for details. I didn't care. Then came the photograph. A neighbor I barely knew sent me a blurry photo taken from a distance. My parents were sitting outside a rundown motel on the outskirts of the city. My father was stooped over, looking at the ground, my mother staring at nothing. 2 plastic grocery bags sat on the sidewalk beside them. There was no car, no home, just a stretch of pavement and whatever pride they had left. I stared at the photograph for a long time, not because I wanted to help, but to feel something. But all I felt was sleepy. I deleted the photo, blocked the number, got up, made coffee, sat by the window, and reflected on how strange it is to outgrow the people who raised you, not because you are superior, but because they never grew. They remained entitled, arrogant, and vicious, even when they were weak. I remembered all the red flags, how I could have walked away earlier. Every time they guilt-tripped me into paying their bills, returning their calls, and attending holidays that felt more like negotiations than gatherings. Every time they acted as if my assistance was there, right, not a favor. And I thought about that last letter. You were a mistake. I used to believe that if I did enough, contributed enough, endured enough, they would eventually say the opposite, that they were proud, that I mattered. However, some people only love you when you are useful, and the moment you stop being useful, they reveal who they truly are. So, I gave myself closure. I printed out the final document just for myself and titled it Severance. Inside, I detailed every debt, payment, sacrifice, and broken promise. Then I typed the last line. You weren't a mistake. You were the final lesson. I haven't heard from them since. But when the ache in my joints returns and reminds me why I set up that reserve fund in the first place, I open that drawer where the letters are still neatly folded and undisturbed. And I remind myself I didn't lose my family. I finally saw them for who they were and moved away while I could. Sometimes, on nights when I can't sleep, I wonder what would have happened if I hadn't checked the bank notice, if I had just kept trusting them, allowing them to drain me dry while smiling at me. Maybe they would have gone back next summer, perhaps to Dubai, somewhere even more ridiculous, and I'd still be paying the bill like a fool. But the truth is, betrayal doesn't begin with $10,000 in a fancy suite. It starts slowly, with silence, little lies, and being told you're selfish for saying no. And if you let it slip enough times, people will eventually believe the lie that you owe them. Always, never again.